I want to welcome everybody. Before we do get started, I do want to let everyone know that we are recording today's session. It will be on the AARP New Hampshire YouTube channel. My name is Mary, and I am one of your co-hosts for today's conversation. I am an AARP New Hampshire volunteer, and with me today is our speaker, Mike Padmore, who is the Associate State Director of Advocacy at AARP New Hampshire. Working with me is Frances Donahue, and she is also co-hosting with me, and she is also monitoring the chat. We do want to hear from you this evening, so if you have a question or you want to make a comment, please use the chat box, which can be accessed by clicking the chat button at the bottom of your screen. At AARP New Hampshire, we are focused on the health, the financial security, and the social connections that are critical to the well-being of the 50+ in the Granite State. We carry out our work through targeted advocacy at the state and federal levels, compelling engagements for the 50+ community statewide, and we also serve as a trusted resource for information for our members and the public. We do have some resources for Social Security, and you can reach that at https://www.aarp.org/retirement/Social Security. I will put the link in the chat. Mike Padmore has spent his career organizing different communities to impact policy change. He has worked mostly for the New Hampshire Medical Society as the Director of Advocacy, where he coordinated New Hampshire's physician community to advocate. He is a graduate of Rowan University in New Jersey, where he earned a BS in political science. He currently leads the AARP New Hampshire Capital City Task Force, and he heads everything advocacy related for the New Hampshire State Office of AARP. Mike, I'm going to hand this presentation over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mary. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I want to welcome you all to AARP New Hampshire's first community conversation about Social Security. My name is Mike Padmore, and I'm the Associate State Director of Advocacy and Outreach with New Hampshire, or AARP New Hampshire. We want this session to be educational and interactive, and so we'll be playing a little trivia game about Social Security. Our goal is to have some fun while also learning about some of the different aspects of Social Security and why it's so important for Granite Staters. We'll also have time for discussion, and we'd like for everyone to participate. So please be mindful and make sure you give others a chance to speak. We also love questions. So please make sure you write them down or make a mental note and ask during the Q&A session at the end. We're going to have that at the end, but I also, I'm happy to take questions kind of throughout. So if there are questions, and I know Frances is going to be monitoring the chat, feel free to throw them into the chat, and I'll try to get to them along the way as well. So now let's get started with a little bit of Social Security trivia. So what is the minimum age to qualify for Social Security retirement benefits? And you can put your answers right into the chat. And I'll give everyone a second to do that. Okay, so 62, that is the answer. The youngest age that someone can claim Social Security is 62. So we'll kind of come back to that a little bit later to kind of talk about that significance, but let's move on to a little Social Security history. Each year that Social Security celebrates a birthday represents another year of security for older Americans. Social Security was signed into law in 1935 and began making payments in 1937. Back then, the payments were lump sum, yearly payments, and things didn't really look very much like they do right now. You see, the payments we recognize today started in 1940 when Miss Ida Mae Fuller received her first monthly Social Security check in the amount of $22.54. That's roughly equivalent to $471 in today's money. And Social Security has continued to improve ever since. In fact, it has an amazing track record of no missed payments. Not too many programs can claim that. And it's important to remember that when we start talking about the politics of Social Security. And again, we'll kind of come back to that towards the end when we start talking about kind of the current state of the program and the politics surrounding it. Can you believe that over 67 million people receive Social Security payments? These come in the form of retirement benefits, survivor benefits, disability benefits, and others. It is the only guaranteed inflation-protected income most Americans will have in retirement. According to the Census Bureau, Social Security accounts for at least 50% of the income for more than half of households headed by someone 65 plus. Not only that, but Social Security provides almost 90% of the income for 1 in 5 of those households. In fact, a 2016 government report estimated that without Social Security, more than 40% of seniors in America would be living at or below the poverty level. Think about that last fact for a moment. What would life in America be like if nearly half of our seniors were living in poverty? And again, to kind of come back to that, think about that when we get into the politics of this and ensuring that this program is bolstered as we move forward. So the economic impact of Social Security. Social Security benefits keeps millions of families afloat and help middle-class workers stay independent after decades of labor. But there's more. Those payments also fuel much of the economic activity in our state and throughout the nation. Here's how that works. Individuals use their benefits on a wide range of goods and services, boosting sales for local retailers, small businesses, and big corporations. After consumers spend the money they earn, businesses spend them once again, using them to finance jobs and make purchases and investments. In other words, the money we spend moves through the economy and multiplies, which helps us boost the economy for everyone. According to AARP's Public Policy Institute, Social Security benefits received by Americans inject about $1.2 trillion into the economy. Again, this is going to be a theme throughout this. This is another fact to remember when we get into the politics of Social Security. Let's take a look at the data from our state. As you can see, 317,389 people are currently receiving some kind of Social Security benefits, and that's here in New Hampshire. If you remember from the previous slide, those could be retirement benefits, survivor benefits, disability benefits, or others. That is a significant number of people. The average Social Security payment for our state is $1,670. Compare that to the number in your own circumstances. What percentage of your income might you have to supplement from other sources once you retire? And then the other point that's important to remember about this is that just as New Hampshire doesn't tax income, New Hampshire also does not tax Social Security. So it's important for you to understand how that might factor into your final benefit amounts. Next up, let's look at Social Security's impact on our state economy. This is the amount of money that people on Social Security are using in local shops, restaurants, and other places, and it's a lot. $5.7 billion. This is a great example of Social Security's far-reaching effects that are often overlooked. And finally, we know that 33.3% of seniors in this state rely on Social Security to stay out of poverty. It's a critical part of retirees' day-to-day lives and the only safety net that many of them have. And I want to kind of this is a slide that as we continue to talk about the politics of this program, this is an important slide to keep in mind. So let's look at how Social Security works. To earn Social Security benefits, you must have been paying into Social Security for about 10 years. That's because you need at least 40 quarters of credits to begin collecting benefits. And most workers earn about 4 credits per year. Everyone's monthly payment is different because it's based on your lifetime earnings and the age that you choose to begin collecting benefits. The more you pay in, the bigger benefit that you get. And the longer you wait to claim, up to age 70, the higher your monthly payout will be. So I'm sure some of you are really looking forward to retirement, or others have retired already. With Social Security, there isn't just one retirement age. You choose when to take the benefits. Remember from our first trivia question, you can get retirement benefits as early as age 62, but your benefits will be reduced if you retire that early. Social Security does have a full retirement age, which is the age when you're entitled to 100% of your Social Security payment. And that age has gradually gone up. And that is also kind of part of the politics of Social Security, the retirement age when folks are able to receive benefits. It has increased from age 66 for people born in 1954 or earlier to age 67 for people born in 1960 or later. Now let's look at an example of how when you take benefits can impact your monthly payment. Let's use an example of a person who was born in January of 1961 and who made about $50,000 a year during their working years. This person would get a monthly benefit of roughly $1,300 if they filed for Social Security at age 62. $1,900, roughly $1,900 a month at full retirement age, in this case, age 67, or roughly $2,400 a month at age 70. The reduction in your benefit amount is permanent if you choose to retire before your full retirement age. Because of this, some people plan to work longer or use savings, pensions, or investments first so they can claim Social Security later and receive a bigger monthly payment. But it's important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all for claiming age for Social Security. So when the time comes, you'll need to examine your resources and make the right decision for your own personal circumstances. Here's a bit of good news. Every year, Social Security recipients get a cost of living adjustment. This means that Social Security payment amounts are increased to account for inflation. That's why Social Security is the only inflation-protected income most people will have in retirement. So no matter what your monthly payment ends up being, it will increase every year with inflation. So you can't outlive it. Social Security is your money. You earned it through a lifetime of hard work. So now that we've gone over the basics, let's talk about some of the recent news that you might have heard about Social Security. You might have heard that Social Security is facing some challenges. What do you think Social Security's biggest challenge is? Is it the funding shortfall? Is it a lower birth rate? Is it people living longer? Or maybe you're just not sure. And let's have folks use the chat function to maybe put in their thoughts, and you can put in just a simple A, B, C, or D. Or if you want to kind of expand on whatever that is, then let's talk about it. I'm just going to give everyone a second. So a little bit of everything, right? It's kind of what we're hearing in the chat. Here's another question for you. Is Social Security going broke? And what I'll do is you can raise your hand in there, or you can use the chat in the chat function. So we've got a couple of yeses, couple no's. Okay, so the answer is no. It is not going broke. Social Security is not going broke. Money is always coming in. Some of you may have heard that you can't rely on Social Security, or that you'll never receive a Social Security payment because Social Security is going broke. That is a common myth, but it is not true. And we will get into that a little bit more as we talk a little bit more about the politics of it. Currently, Social Security has about $3 trillion in its trust fund. It can pay full benefits until 2034 and nearly 80% after that. However, if Congress doesn't act in the next 10 years, Social Security payments could be cut by 20% or more for everyone. So again, that kind of gets into it. Is it going to go broke? It is not going to go broke. Is it right now on track for a reduction unless Congress acts? Yes, and that is part of what we're going to talk about a little bit later. So here's another question. Is Social Security causing the national debt to skyrocket? And we'll just use the chat function. If you think yes, you can put A, and no, you can list B in the chat. Perfect. I think we're all on the same page for this one. No, Social Security is money Americans have earned. It is not a driver of the nation's debt, so it shouldn't be cut in order to pay it off. And that is key, because as folks, you listen to the news, whatever it is, you can hear, that Social Security is driving the debt. We need to cut it in order to fix the debt. It is a political talking point that folks use, but it's important to know that it is not contributing to the national debt. And so if that ever comes up, if you're ever talking with somebody and they say that to you, you can very clearly say the answer is no, it is not a driver of our national debt. So let's go over a little bit more about how Social Security is funded. Social Security is a self-funded program. It collects money from payroll taxes and a tax on Social Security payments. Some of you might be surprised to find out that your Social Security payments can be taxed. In New Hampshire, the state does not tax that, but other states may tax that. The retirement fund is also funded by trust funds. In 1983, Congress created trust funds, one for retirement payments and one for disability payments, to build up reserves and prepare for the retirement of the baby boomers. Currently, Social Security has about $3 trillion in these trust funds. That sounds like a lot of money. However, America is changing. People are having less children, which means fewer workers pay into the system, and people are also living longer. That's making it more difficult to keep Social Security funded properly. Even with these trust funds, so people are living longer, but that doesn't mean that they are working longer. And as the large baby boomer generation retires and leaves the workforce, there are fewer workers left paying into Social Security to make up the difference. That's why we must make sure that Social Security is well funded far into the future. Okay, so now we start talking about the politics and where Congress comes in. So even though there's currently a surplus in the Social Security Trust Fund in the year 2022, Social Security began using it to pay beneficiaries. Based on current reports by trustees who manage the trust funds, Social Security will face a shortfall in 2034. So we have effectively a 10-year window. If Congress doesn't act in the next 10 years, your Social Security could be cut by 20%. Together, we must fight to make sure that that never happens. And it's important to note that Congress has a stake in this too, because they're folks that pay into it just like everyone else. And so it's important to remember that as we engage our elected officials. We know that Congress needs to act to protect Social Security. So that, to be very clear, that is a congressional action. They are the ones that are responsible. Certainly the president, who works with Congress, plays a role in that, but Congress is the entity that actually will take that action that can impact what happens with Social Security. Most adults agree that Congress must immediately work to ensure full benefits for current and future beneficiaries. So that's something that we have polled. In fact, a full 90% of those polled say that Republicans and Democrats must work together to find a solution to finance Social Security benefits. So this is bipartisan. It's not just Democrats, it's not just Republicans that want this, it is both. And so that's super important to remember as we move forward. The poll also found that 85% of respondents agree that Social Security makes it possible for them to remain independent and not have to depend on their children or family during retirement. The results are clear. Americans want Congress to reach a bipartisan solution to protect and save Social Security for seniors and future generations. So what I want to do is, I'm going to go back because I want to kind of open this up. What we do at AARP is we're focused on how are we engaging with our elected officials how can we impact them when it comes to the work that they're doing? And so this is a combination of different things. We have a voter engagement program, and what that is that something that during the presidential primary, for example, we had volunteers talking with the folks who are running for president, asking them about a few different issues, but asking them about Social Security, asking them, how do they intend to protect this program? And so one of the things that I kind of want to open up is, if this is you and you have an opportunity to talk with either a presidential candidate, or maybe it's Senator Maggie Hassan or one of our congresspeople, what would you talk with them about? What would you say to them? What would be your question? And so I'm going to open this up and just see if folks have questions, if folks have comments, chime in the chat. Just going to kind of give it a second here for folks. Well, I'm going to keep moving on to the next slide here. So AARP has always fought to protect your Social Security, and we will never stop fighting to make sure that you've got the money you've earned. You've worked hard and paid into Social Security, so it's only fair for you to expect Congress to protect it for your future. AARP will keep fighting to make sure that the government keeps its promise so that you, your family, and future generations can continue to count on Social Security, just as the millions of Americans have for the past 88 years. So right here, we've got a QR code. And so this is an opportunity if you want to just an immediate action. And so this is a petition that we have that effectively is saying that you're pledging to protect Social Security. It's something that we use when we talk with elected officials, saying how many people want Social Security protected. And so if you want to, I'm going to just leave this up here for a second. Folks can scan that with their phone, or you can just go to the AARP.org. You earned it, and then that'll take you to the petition, so you can sign your name onto there.
Hey, Mike.
And I'm going to go into the chat here as well. Yeah, go ahead, Francis.
Oh, okay, because I didn't know if you were going to go in the chat. So someone had said, what's currently being done to fund the future of Social Security? And
yes. I'll touch on that one first. And so this is really where advocacy comes in, and engaging folks who are running for office, because the answer is what is currently being done to fund the future of Social Security is there's a lot of elected officials that are kind of talking maybe about this and saying, yes, I think that Social Security should be protected, but no one is really brought forward any concrete proposals. And so that is really the thing that we want to encourage elected officials to do, is to effectively pledge that they want to protect Social Security, and that they will work in a bipartisan manner to work on a solution to make sure that Social Security is funded by 2034. And then the other part is that they can be creative and think through solutions of how can we bring Democrats and Republicans together to work on this issue. And so, this is something that I think it requires kind of a constant drumbeat. And so, again, when we're talking about, say, the New Hampshire primary, for example, where all the presidential candidates are coming through, we are consistently talking with them and asking them, about what their, will they work to protect Social Security, and B, will they work to come up with solutions and proposals? Because this is one of those things that there's no specific political solution to this. It is going to require elected officials to kind of hear from their constituents, to know that this is a priority, and then for them to prioritize it. And I think that's how I've always understood lawmakers to make decisions, is that the more that they hear from their constituents on particular issues, that is what drives their priorities. If they don't hear about a certain issue, it's not going to be a high priority for them. But if they are constantly hearing about certain issues, that is going to raise that on their priority level. And so I think the more that we can kind of continue to do that, the more that the elected officials will take notice and will have urgency. And again, we've got 10 years to do this. I think that what will happen is the more that we kind of consistently do this over the course of the next 10 years, the closer we get to that 2034 mark, the urgency is going to continue to build. And so I think it's super important that we just continue that drumbeat along the way. And I saw Marcia made a comment, and I think the comment was when I kind of threw out that question of, what would you say, to a presidential candidate? What would you say, to one of our elected officials, our federal elected officials? Do they understand the imperative to fund Social Security, as most folks depend on that income? And I think, again, that is something that we want to drive home, that folks depend on this income. And I think another part of this, and I kind of mentioned this towards the beginning of the presentation, when we're talking about the economic impact of Social Security payments, this is not just money. So first off, again, it is self-funded, but this is money that is then getting recirculated into the economy. And it's super important to remember that, because when you think about the amount of money, so it was roughly $5 trillion, that is being that folks are receiving. That is money that is circulating through our economy. It is being spent on goods and services, at local businesses, at larger businesses, and it's super important to continue to re-emphasize that point with lawmakers, because some lawmakers, that might be a big driving point of this, is that, without Social Security, if that is to get cut, then that's less money being put back into our economy, which is going to hurt small businesses. It's going to hurt some of these different, whether it's small or large businesses, it's going to impact them. And then I see we've got, just want to check the chat and just see if there's anything else in there. So I'm going to keep moving, and I'm going to move to the next slide. So the next one that I've got here is, here's another action that you can take. My Social Security. So you're everyone is able to create a My Social Security account, and that will let you get an exact estimate of your Social Security benefit based on your actual earnings. And so that QR code, or of course you can just go to ssa.gov, and that will allow you to create your My Social Security account, and would recommend folks do this. It is certainly a good exercise, just to kind of understand this program. And obviously you can actually get some more specifics to your own situation. And so I'll leave that up there for just another second, and also just take a look at the chat and just see if folks have questions. And I saw Marcia also just put in the chat, that Social Security barely pays rent. And I think that, that's something that we are certainly seeing more and more of, where rent costs, housing costs are going up. And so the point I think that Marcia's making is that, we need to ensure that this program is funded, because folks utilize that for all of their daily expenses, whether it's rent, whether it's food, whatever transportation, whatever that might be. And so to have any cut would be a significant hit to a lot of folks out there. And I'm going to go on to our last slide here. And this is just simply thank you all for joining us. And what I'll do here is I just want to kind of pause and just see if folks have questions, comments. Feel free to put those in the chat. And I think, I'm not positive, but I'm not sure. Yeah, if folks want to actually make a verbal, comment or question, I think you can raise your hand using the raise hand function, and then we can actually just go ahead and allow you to voice that right through the Zoom. And so I'll pause there and just see if folks want to chime in with any questions or comments. I appreciate that, Sharon. Yeah, I really think the reason why we're doing this, and I kind of said this at the top, is one, we want this to be educational. We want folks to understand this program. But I think in my role, certainly, so I am the Director of Advocacy and Outreach, and really part of my role, a big part of my role, is engaging our elected officials. And the reality is that the first step to protecting this program is first to understanding how it works and how it impacts people, and then the second is to then be able to engage our elected officials to make sure that they understand the urgency and the need that we have. And so that is the work that I'm doing. And I see a lot of folks on the call that I know that are engaged in some of this different work. But if that's something that you are interested in, I'm going to go into and make sure that I reach out to folks as a follow-up to see if folks are interested in kind of getting involved more in the work that we're doing with our elected officials at the federal level on this issue. And I'm going to go and just check the chat. So Francis, put a great question, and the question is, how can we get our representatives to work together to fix this problem? So the answer is simple and also complicated in my mind. It's simple from the standpoint of it requires us, and I think what I mean is organizations like AARP to work with the people of our state, and certainly AARP is a national organization that's doing this work all over the country. But it really is kind of a collaborative effort of organizations like AARP working with folks in our communities to, I think, again, I kind of go back to what I just said, educating people first on the program so that folks understand what is at stake and how this program impacts them and the rest of their community. And then the second is then, and again, I think AARP is really, the driver of this from the organization standpoint, is then giving those individuals the strategy, or not the strategy, but the helping folks kind of engage with their elected officials, because that can be complicated. And so I think that's where sort of people at AARP like myself come in when there are folks that are impacted by Social Security that maybe have a specific story of how this impacts them. It's up to me to be able to help those individuals connect with their local representatives to kind of drive that urgency. And so I really think that kind of going back to what I said earlier, it is a consistent drumbeat of our lawmakers around the country, certainly our New Hampshire lawmakers, or what I mean our New Hampshire federal lawmakers, because our state lawmakers aren't going to have it's not a state issue necessarily, but it's us engaging our federal lawmakers to just make sure that they understand this urgency. And then, from there, I think when we are able to kind of drive this urgency with our lawmakers, the hope is that those lawmakers are then going to work with the rest of Congress, right? So if we have Senator Shaheen, if we have Senator Hassan, Congresswoman Custer, and Congressman Pappas, if they know that this is a priority for New Hampshire voters and New Hampshire citizens, then our hope is that they are going to then work with their colleagues in the Senate and the House to identify solutions on how we can sort of work on this issue. And I'm going to go back and just see what other comments and questions we might have in the chat. Yep, and just a note that Marcia made and that we kind of made earlier is that folks need to understand Social Security can be taxed federally, and so that's just a note. And I think she also mentioned, I do think we were here 10 years ago. And so this is something that is just sort of consistent where we need in 5 years. It's possible that we will still be in a similar place where, there have been no concrete solutions that have come up with, but it's up to us to kind of continue that drumbeat with our elected officials to make sure that they know that this is a priority for us. Yeah, and then Sharon brought up somehow this issue has turned into a partisan issue. How did that happen? So, I think part of that, in my mind, we're kind of going back to that one sort of like myth that we talked about around the national debt. I think that is something that has sort of been misconstrued and been used, and necessarily partisan or not, but there are certainly some lawmakers that have kind of made this into we need to cut Social Security because that's how we're going to kind of solve our national debt. And so part of that is misinformation, and part of it is also probably some politicking, right? Them sort of utilizing this program as a political football, and and saying that it's contributing to our national debt, and so it's something that that we need to cut in order to solve that. And so I think one of the things that I kind of mentioned earlier was, if you hear that comment around, well, I heard my congressman say that, or I heard the president, or whatever. I'm not saying this president or this congressman or whatever, but just if you hear this now from a friend in the future, just know that you can confidently say that that is not the case, that this isn't partisan. You can even go back to one of the slides that we had earlier where we were talking about the polling around this, and that it is not a partisan issue, that Democrats and Republicans both believe that this is something that needs to be solved. And again, I mean, it's a program that impacts everyone in this country. And so that, I think, is the note that I think we want to continue to harp on with any elected officials that we speak with, is just the impact that this has, and that this is a bipartisan issue, and that they should be encouraged to work on it. Well, I'm going to pause and just see if there are any other comments or questions. Well, thank you. I really appreciate folks taking the time to join us tonight. I want to thank Mary and Francis for helping to administer this program. And if there are any follow-up questions, anything that you are curious about, interested in getting more involved in some of the advocacy and the voter engagement work that we're doing, feel free to reach out to myself. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put my email in the chat so that folks have that. And then again, what I mentioned is I'm going to try to reach out to all the folks that were on this, of course, but also try to reach out to some of the folks that maybe didn't join us tonight, and just try to follow up with them about some of the work that we're doing. So thank you all again for joining. And I'm going to just finish by putting my email into the chat. Let that sit there for a sec, and just appreciate everyone joining tonight. So thanks, everybody.
So thank you, Mike. This was a really great presentation, and I'm sure a lot of people on this Zoom call had really learned a few interesting facts about Social Security that we didn't know before. So thank you very much for this presentation.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Mary.
Great job, Mike.
Thanks, Francis. Thanks, everybody.